Well, Tom and Veronica, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be able to sit down with both of you and talk about what I think is one of the greatest films in film history. It's definitely one of my favorites, and of course, that is Alien. And I'm very delighted to speak with both of you and to be able to, understand more about the performances that you all delivered and really just anchored the film and I think really made it special and why it still stands the test of time, its authenticity. So thank you both so much for joining me today.
It's our pleasure. My pleasure.
All right. Well, let me start and ask you a little bit about the genesis of the characters Captain Dallas and Lambert. And so I've read the shooting version of the script, and it's very to the point. It's very short on exposition. There's not a lot of character detail. And then, I believe it was one of the commemorative documentaries. They said that Ridley Scott like really didn't provide y'all with a lot of character direction during filming, kind of intentionally to keep you kind of uncertain and on edge. I think to try to kind of heighten that mood, so y'all and your cast, so you and your castmates were left to create your custom, or you and your castmates were left to create your characters' personas. What were the inspirations you drew upon for your characters? And Tom, let me start with you. And where did Captain Dallas come from?
From a script that I read in a hotel in Minneapolis, it just said Alien, and they're making an offer, and there was nothing else about it except $2 million budget.
Hmm.
And I really questioned whether I want to do this for $2 million. It could be another Ed. I can't remember his name. The worst director ever. If you're going to be doing a $2 million film with that script, you'd have to hang the rocket ships with a string and give it away. So I just question it, and the director, the one of the producers says, "Well, look at this film, and then we'll talk about it." So I looked at something called The Duelists. Now I had no idea who Ridley Scott was. He was a creative graphics guy, and his Duelist was his first movie. 5 minutes into it, I said, I got to work with that guy.
Hmm.
I don't care about anything else. Everything is going to work out. The budget went up to 10 million, and I went to England. That's where it all started for me. And then I just saw this to work and go into Ridley's office, and I saw this group of wonderful actors, most of all Veronica, who I felt was the best thing in the film. And away we went. And I remember we got 2 pages into reading it. Remember that, Veronica? We were 2 pages into reading that script and cats and all that. And he starts saying, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And he starts explaining the whole movie. And he goes and says this, I'm going to do Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I thought, okay. Well, and then he says, the less you see the bad guy, the more frightened you become. And that was it. And then some guy came in and said, hey, we need you on the set. And that was the end of it. And I thought at the time, I don't know if you remember, Veronica, we were all just sitting with our mouths open, having just met one another. And I remember thinking, okay, so as the captain, I think I said something like, okay, so since I'm the captain of the ship, I guess I should say something to you all. And I'm wondering if we're going to be the ingredients for this movie, as I put it. And well, it turned out we were, but I think we all just started to laugh and say, how you doing? How you doing? So that's really how it all started.
What was interesting is John Finch was playing the part that John Hurt ended up playing.
Mhm.
So our first cast meeting was with John Finch,
Mhm.
and we started shooting, which he started in the engine room,
Mhm.
and there was tons. I mean, Ridley loved smoke. And in those days, that was the smoke they made out of beeswax, and they would just pump it in. Well, John Fitch had just apparently gotten out of the hospital from having pneumonia, and he was back in that night
Mhm.
because there was so much smoke. And the next day, John Hurt shows up. And I thought to myself, oh my God, we look like clones of each other. We both had the same color skin. He had the same haircut because Ridley had had me cut all my hair off, which was like an all day process of torture. And I mean, just thought, oh my gosh. So there were sort of obstacles thrown at us right from the very beginning.
Mhm.
And we just learned to bounce off of each other. I mean, you had to listen in this movie because if you didn't listen to the other person,
Mhm.
I mean, it's like sort of in a weird sort of way, like doing a stage play.
Mhm.
You're sort of, if you don't listen, then you're just sort of left out there to hang. So it was, and I think Ridley got, well, people that were really established and really good at what they did,
Mhm.
good character actors. But we weren't sort of like known in a sense. I mean, we weren't people that you could say, oh, there's Meryl Streep
Mhm.
or something like that. We were all really good at listening to each other.
Mhm.
And we sort of ended up forming our characters just by um, bouncing off of each other, I think.
No, and I'd seen in previous interviews in it, Tom, I think you talked about like kind of the impulse nature of, the performance, and Veronica, we were talking and you mentioned kind of that kitchen table kind of give and take. How much of your performances would you say were like impulse driven? You were just kind of like you were saying, just kind of Yaphet would do something or Harry Dean would do something, and you just react to it, and then how much of it was kind of maybe thought out beforehand, like Tom, I love that scene where you're investigating the acid and you're like, you want Harry Dean's pen, and you're like, hey, give me your pen. You're like, come on. And it's like, it's this like understated comedy, but like how much of it was like impulse driven versus like y'all worked it out beforehand? Hey, I'm gonna do this, and then you do that. Like, how would you kind of characterize how that all came about?
You don't think about it. I never really, as an actor, ever really thought predetermined what I was going to do.
Me
A lot
neither.
of a lot of what you really do is just respond to the other person like you do in theater. You
Mhm.
get the lines down and you go. If you don't have the instincts, the impulses that come out of the instincts, uh, you look like an actor.
Mhm.
And I never really wanted to look like an actor in anything.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of what other people like Veronica, who I said earlier gave the performance that I admired.
Mhm.
She had to go all over the place, and she was representing the fear that all of us were trying to deny.
Mhm.
And I was just taken by the way she works. So, and that's all impulse.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'm speaking for you, but we don't work by thinking about it. If you think about it, it's like going to the Mona Lisa and saying, "Why is this the greatest painting ever?" It's got a little smile on her face. It's never been in a painting ever before,
Mhm.
and it's where the questions that people ask when they look at it and say, "What is that little smile? Where's she from?" And the question marks is always what you give people. What else is falling? Don't they see what's happening behind them? It's for the audience to just wonder why they're behaving the way they're behaving.
That was so well put, Tom. No, but it's true. I mean, like that kitchen scene when we were Yaphet and I don't know, I sort of had got a special bond with Yaphet. he was just a sweetheart, and he and I just got along.
Mhm.
And I did not realize, it was so funny because when we were sitting around the kitchen table and all of a sudden we're talking about eating or something like that. And he goes, well, I know what I would like to eat. And I looked at him and I knew immediately what he was talking. And it was like, so in my mind, there was always sort of, they had had a relationship at some point.
Mhm.
Which was so strange when the Cameron movie came out, which was 13 years after ours. Somebody put a sticker in the back saying that I was transgender. Well, and how do you feel about being a transgender? Well, I didn't play it as a transgender person. That was Cameron's idea. I had always thought that I had a relationship with Yaphet, and he and I would play off of each other. There was always these little things that were going on.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. It just seemed totally real. We would have lunch together and we just became totally comfortable with each other. And that, I think, came out in the movie. And he sort of, in a weird sort of way, became protective of me.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes the end work when he's sort of trying to protect me from what is going to happen. And I think all of that came out of just working together. And I don't know. I mean, it was just sort of, I mean, yeah, I mean, nobody was like acting. We were all listening.
Mhm.
And Ridley's directions were sort of very, what can I say? They weren't driven as from an actor's point of view. It was
Mhm.
all sort of visceral, the
Mhm.
same way he would always be looking at the way things were.
Yeah.
So, like when I had to slap Sigourney when we come back, and I have to slap her across the face. Well, it was written in the script that I slap her across the face because I'm pissed off. But
Mhm.
every time I went to slap Sigourney, she would duck it.
Mhm.
So my direction was, would you just get her this time? So I thought, oh, well, okay. So I go like that. She ducks it, and I backhanded her.
Mhm.
She went into it, and tears instantly came to her eyes. And oh, she was pissed off, which was perfect for
Mhm.
that moment of what it had to be.
Yeah.
And Ridley had a weird instinct of things like that. Um, and I don't know, did you ever have those things with Ridley where it was like sort of reactionary, not sort of like, well, this is what you're thinking about or anything like that. He trusted us all to have that. So, I mean, if it was to be something like that, which, just seemed like a bold move that I would make,
Mhm.
he sort of got the characters to do things like that.
So let me ask you this, and I think you probably touched on it a little bit, but I just want to kind of unpack it a little bit. Were you conscious of playing against like science fiction film tropes, such as like the intrepid commander or the damsel in distress and that sort of thing? And like for me, it's like I think it's so like Dallas's death scene is so pivotal. Like for me, it's like that's actually where I think the narrative pivots, because when you look at like classic films like The Thing from Another World or whatnot, it's always the cool and in control commander. Nothing's ever going to get him. He's going to get through. He's going to save the day. But in Alien, suddenly like halfway through the film, like we lose our captain, who's like the voice of authority, and then suddenly it's like all bets are off. It's anything goes at this point. But so in your performances, were you conscious of like maybe playing against like those kind of like well-heeled, well-trod tropes and like trying to do something different? Or were you just like, was it again maybe more organic, impulse driven, just like I'm just reacting to the other actors and to the situation?
Well, I
Are you
didn't consciously think of anything that was No, I mean, we were just characters. We were these people on a ship. We were doing our jobs. I didn't think of anything, pre-think of anything, or think of it as being a science fiction. I mean, we all got to see Balaji first when we were coming in because they were making his suit to him. So we had a sense of what it was that, you know, there was something that was ominous going on. But no, I don't. I mean, I didn't think of it. Oh, this is a big science fiction movie. Everything was so awesome anyway. Everything was so big, and going through those caves and across the damn desert that was really a desert, and carrying John Hurt because we couldn't have a puppet in there. It had to be John. And oh my God, so sweat and tears and all those anxieties and anger of walking across and not being able to breathe in that damn bubble we had on our head. All of those things were, nothing was sort of planned. It just was coming out of organic, I guess, which was cool.
That's like working in theater. You just simply can't think. If you think, you're just putting a block right in front of you.
Absolutely.
You just cannot act. I never learned to be an actor. I just I went around walking around following Ridley everywhere he went. I just wanted to learn more. I learned a lot from Hal Ashby and from Bob Altman, who I'd worked with earlier. Just following these guys around to really look at things and really absorb it all, see how it's shot, what lens you use, what lights are being used, all of this. And you see what Ridley was doing in the background. He had smoke going across the screen. The first time I'd ever seen anything like that. It was just the marvel of working with this guy, and then being with the rest of this gang and the ship, and also having, coincidentally, what I really liked was this, before I knew who else was going to be in it, that a woman survives, a woman wins, a woman takes it on, the strength of women are what this was all about. Is she somehow or another walks out of this thing and becomes the actress in several things that followed. They were not the alien, but they were called as such because of the success of what it said and what it didn't say. And I just love that idea of these two women in this group of men. And what was going on? Was there anything going on? There was some suggestion in the screenplay that my character was having a little fling with the other lady, and at the time I thought, I don't know if that really works story-wise. So it was, I mean, in terms of pace, it's like at the end of the film when she's running around trying to get the cat before the thing explodes. I thought, what a great thing to do, because what I was concerned about was they had me at the end stuck on a wall, being absorbed by an egg. She's trying to figure out how to save me, and I just say, hit me with a blowtorch, which she finally did. See, that would just break the whole flow. If she's running around, looking around, and she's got to stop and say, "Oh, hi there, Captain." And I'm saying, "Never mind, I have indigestion. Zap me." And she said, "You got it, baby." And she zapped me. See, that would have been just not the pace. And that's what Ridley always got, was about the rhythm. Tap your feet always with rhythm when you watch a movie. If it doesn't have rhythm, it ain't got an audience.
Well, and I mentioned this to Veronica earlier. You know, I think it's really poignant that your two characters' deaths are the two deaths that are not shown in the movie. I know that they put out the director, the quote unquote director's version, where they put the cocoon scene in, but it actually works better, the theatrical version, because it's to me anyway, it's more terrifying. Like, we don't know what happened to Captain Dallas. The creature snatched him in the shaft and we never see him again. It's like, who knows what happened? And it's the same thing with Lambert. It's like, we hear those terrible screams and things going on the audio, but like, that's worse than like being shown like what happened to Yaphet or Harry Dean or whatever, you know. So I think
Whatever happens in anything, a piece of art, whatever it is,
Mhm.
you can't give it all to an audience. You can't. A story is only as interesting as what you don't tell them on the way. And I was reading a book. Cormac McCarthy is one hell of a writer.
Mhm.
Uh, what's going? So this horrible stuff that he's writing about, but it's so sweet the way he's writing it. And that's true of anything. Whatever we do visually and audio with audio added in talking movies
Mhm.
is what you don't do ultimately in any story that's being told.
Mhm.
Don't give it away.
No.
Just make it go. What happened with Alien was it wasn't enough.
Mhm.
Really, all we saw was she kicked it out.
Yeah, I may be alone in this, but I'm at least this fan. I wish they had stopped with your movie because I feel like they've done everything they can to try to milk the franchise and try to explain this and explain that, and it's like it just kind of messes with it. It's like just leave well enough alone. I know that it's Hollywood and they can't leave well enough alone,
Plus,
but
plus there were so many. Well, the second one, I like the second one, but when they started putting more and more aliens in,
Mm.
it just started to become a ridiculous. I mean, and that one with the Winona Ryder, and they looked like sperm swimming across that water. I mean, there were so many of them; it was just totally ridiculous.
Mhm.
And I think that sort of took away from the other movies. Frankly, I agree with you. I mean, it's what was so frightening about the other thing, and you didn't know what was going to happen. You thought it had gotten expelled, And
Yeah.
I always remember Tom and I remember the scene when you're up in the tunnel up in going trying to find the alien and where it is. So, and I have that box, and I'm down there with Yaphet, and you're up in the. Well, Tom and I had to go into a sound studio and watch that whole thing, how it had been cut together. And then we had to recreate that entire thing. And it was really hard to do that. But at the same time, it was just sort of, I thought it was an interesting way to do it. Nobody realizes that it's being, the two of us were standing next to each other watching a screen and recreating what we had done on the set. That was really a trippy day, I must say.
Yeah, were you recreating it like the audio, you mean? Like you were
All the audio. Yeah. We had to stand next to each other, and I'm saying, Dallas, and Tom's talking, and then we were just literally standing next to each other because they had edited it.
Mhm.
And, they had to somehow, I guess we went in and it was all ADR, watching a screen and recreating it.
Mhm.
It was really a trip, I must say. But nobody knows that we didn't
Yeah.
do that on the stage. I mean, it was.
Well, so let me ask you this. There was a very complex movie. There was just a lot of challenges getting it done, right? And a lot of physical challenges. I mean, these stories about like the spacesuits didn't have air holes and, like the smelting pots with all the smoke and everything. And it's exhausting and it's tough. And, I'm sure there are probably moments where people didn't all get along, or weren't maybe as courteous as they could have been, and personalities and things like that. So it's like before Alien, you both had very successful careers. And, at the time, despite Star Wars, most 70s science fiction films it wasn't the industry that it is now, where they're like, it's just so big and it just makes so much money. So, and we talked about this, that you're kind of signing up for at what was at that point like a B movie. I know that the budget got ramped up, and Ridley obviously is a very extraordinarily talented director, but there's no sure things here. So my question for y'all is, was there ever a point in the shoot, perhaps when things were arduous or chaotic, where you were thinking, I may have made a mistake saying yes to this movie? And if so, what helped you kind of work through that and persevere through it?
From my standpoint, absolutely no. It was just going to be very early on. I think from reading it and seeing this guy directing it, and then this cast, and this wonderful Veronica person who gave this wonderful performance and really held it back. That was a choice to watch. Everybody else was playing what they played, but it was pretty straightforward. And it was just everybody looked wonderful. Never mind all that stuff. We were terrific. He was terrific. The lighting was his. Everything he did was his. He was an artist. He's an artist, a true artist. He was painting this as he went along. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but I have no doubt about that. That was going to be a classic. I remember having a conversation with Yaphet Kotto about 2 weeks in this. I said, this is going to be a classic, don't you? He says, hell yeah, man. There was no doubt in my mind, because in the 70s, which is best decade for movies of the 20th century, I happened to stumble on the best directors ever. Well, Ashby and Altman, and now Ridley. And I said, how did I get to be so fortunate? So my whole approach was never about, gee, that I don't have that kind of ego that gets into this stuff, and I can't answer questions that you would give me because I don't think that way. It was about just simply the joy of being able to do this, working with people like this. And what I'm learning all the time, every time, it was about films that possibly I was just writing about one of the worst films I ever did, which was done in Africa and Brazil. And it was just terrifyingly terrible, awful. The director was the screenwriter. And I had forgotten about this until recently, because I'm writing a memoir. And to be with this group of people, this class of actors, for me was a reward as much as anything. And being, first of all, with this director who I said 5 minutes into looking at duelists, I said, I want to work with him. I didn't know no one else was cast yet. So there was no doubt, if you got a director like that, you go with it. If you don't like the director, the writing, he'll make it work. And he just made it work, and we were all there for him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, Veronica, for you, was it pretty much the same thing? Like, you knew it was going to be a classic, and no question, I'm going to, whatever it takes.
I had no idea it was going to be a classic movie. It was, I don't know. I thought the movie was very, it was rewarding in the sense of, working with really great people. And it was really a tough shoot, I thought. I thought it was very hard. But I didn't know that it would end up being as big as it was. As Tom said, it was a B movie. That's what we thought. We were there, but it was a great group of people. So let's just cross our fingers. We weren't going to put up with, having no air holes in our spacesuits and God, having it be, the hottest summer they'd had in century. All of it had to be worth something. So it was nice that, but it was very weird. They didn't throw a premiere. There was some weird stuff that went on around the movie. Like Harry Dean wanted to buy us all Nostromo hats so we could all have Nostromo hats. But the producers wouldn't split the hats with him. So we didn't get anything. There was really no premiere. I went and saw it at the Egyptian Theater, and I stood in line to go see it. just so I could see what it was like with an
I
audience.
believe in the director, totally in the director and the cast. And that was all that was necessary. It was
Yeah, I mean, it
within
was
2 weeks, I knew this was going to be a classic because you were there. Okay? Leave it at that.
well,
Don't get
that's
too
awfully sweet.
don't get too into it.
I didn't
It
I
was
didn't know it was
meant,
going to be
it
a
was meant
classic,
to
but
be
I
what
guess
it
I'm looking
was. It
forward.
was meant to be what it was, and you were the pie.
Yeah. Well, can you believe it's been you actually? So I was looking this up. You started principal photography in early July 1978. So I mean, it just 45 years ago you started filming this. Are
Wow.
you surprised? I know you see it's a classic, and like and it's a classic, but are you surprised by its endurance and about like how everything, this whole cottage industry is kind of bloomed around it? And in fact, they're making another Alien film, I think, for next year. Like, so it's
Well, no doubt, because they're running on tires that the tires were on a long time ago, so they just keep. I have a long, very long, because I scattered myself out to be listened to what executives talked about.
Mhm.
In those days, they talked about films that would be well enough to get revenue from your audience. There would be good stories, well told. And you had the one who's going to tell it is going to be the director ultimately.
Mhm.
And we are pages in a book, actors are. I don't mean to marginalize it, but we are. And the painter is guys, the good directors. If they don't know how to paint, we have to take over.
Mhm.
We didn't have to do
Right.
anything.
Stop it.
Mhm.
Bless your heart. Did I lie? What
No, no, no. My dog's starting to bark, so that's why I was
bothers me most is that we lost the other guys. I'm the only man left.
Mhm.
All the others are gone. So that saddens me.
Yeah.
Nothing about that movie. All I remember was a lot of laughing. And one of the things I learned very early on, when I was one of the main characters in the movie, was to let's just not get our egos in the way, guys.
Mhm.
Let's just blend together and be a football team, all solid defensive and offensive line. Got great quarterback. We got everything we need. Let's all do this together.
Mhm.
Nash was one of those. Altman was one of those directors.
Mhm.
And then when we did that, I just found a lot of reason. When we did Alien, I just saw a lot of reason to laugh
Mhm.
at the way we approach things. One actor was who wanted to. I won't say which one, but after lunch, he wanted to get himself all fired up, and he's doing everything he possibly can to get fired up. And I'm standing in back of two English crewmen,
Mhm.
all of them very much gentlemen. And he's going, yeah, and he stops and he looks at these guys. Hey, God damn it, man, what you guys just sat around with your hands on your ass? Don't say anything. Come on, get up. And then he turns around and goes, he says, I'm done. I'm ready. Let's shoot it. And there's this long silence. And one guy looks at the other, and I'll never forget this. I'm kind of wondering, I'm smiling at this because I know Yaphet had quite a sense of humor, but he got out of control every now and then. And the one English guy looks at the other and says, isn't it grand being English? I just fell apart. That was one of my great memories of Alien, was that moment of an actor who really has to kind of work himself up and get hostile and everything else, and go and take it on into the scene, and have the Englishman round it up. Oh, Jesus.
Well,
God. Bless his heart. He was such a sweetheart. My God.
so Tom and Veronica, I want to thank you both so much for spending this time with me and revisiting Alien. It's a much loved classic, and it's amazing. It has stood the test of time, and it's just remarkable. They just It literally is one of those instances of like they don't make them like they used to. And so, and a huge part of that is the performances you both gave. So thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure.